everybody. You are listening or watching Chatting with Candice. I'm your host, Candice Horbacz. Before we get into this week's episode, if you want to check out some of the sponsors and affiliates below, they are all products or programs that I actually use and endorse, so check those out. We would do our cups of coffee, but I believe we are all caught up from the last episode that I actually filmed. So if you want to buy a cup of coffee, all of that goes right back into the podcast. You can go to chattingwithcandice.com and click that little link that says buy me a coffee. It helps out a ton. Also, as always, make sure you are clicking like and subscribe, leaving a 5-star review, sharing with your friends and family, all that good stuff. This is a small village and I couldn't do without you. Also, huge milestone. We hit 1 million views on YouTube. And I know that doesn't seem like a lot for some people. For me, I'm really excited. I've been trying to make content that's unique and engaging and curious for a while, and that's my big milestone. So I'm really excited about that. I want to say thank you so much for everyone that's been downloading and listening, and I couldn't do it without you. So thank you so much, and we'll just keep chugging along. This week we have the incredible Craig Siegel joining the podcast. Craig is the host of the CLS Experience podcast. That is a top rising, top downloading, fastest growing podcast. He is a global keynote speaker, rising thought leader, featured in Entrepreneur magazine, and endorsed by some of the world's most well-known celebrities, entertainers, athletes, and entrepreneurs such as Rob Dyrdek, Ed Middle, Bethany Hamilton, Suzanne Summers, and Alicia Silverstone. Please help me welcome the incredible Craig Siegel. Craig, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm really excited to get to know you a little bit better.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited. We were chatting before we hit record. There's a lot of alignment here. Let's have some fun.
Yeah, let's do it. I love the work that you're doing, and I'm trying to figure out like a great introductory point. And I think the thing that's kind of calling to me is like starting with mindset change and like the whole concept of going from Wall Street to now keynote speaker, insanely popular podcast. You have your own courses, like you're really trying to get people to shift their mindset and kind of create the life that they want. And you're doing it within your own life. So you're leading by example, which is a beautiful thing. So, I guess there's this quote, and I wanted to read it to you and see what
Love
your
a good quote.
people change when they hurt enough that they have to, when they learn enough that they want to, and when they see enough that they're inspired to, or they receive enough and they're able to. And I love that so much because I think that we often get caught in this cycle of trying to change other people, and we want them to be the perfect spouse or the perfect business partner or the perfect parent. But really, that's more of an inside job. And I totally agree with all of those things. I'm curious if any of those ring true for your own growth and personal development.
To be honest with you, all of them did. Especially the one with like hurt. It reminds me of a quote I heard back in the day that's like, you got to become sick and tired of being sick and tired, and just
Mhm.
knowing that you're here for something more than you're currently settling for, so
Mhm.
to speak. And to be honest with you, I forgot the other ones that you said, but to be honest, they all resonated with me. They all hit home. And you said something about knowing, right? Like when you get to a point where you know better, kind of like know
Mhm.
better, do better. That's what I
Mhm.
was thinking. But it's a great quote, and all of them resonate, if I'm being honest.
So what was your pain point? What was like the biggest pain point for you?
Just to give a little context, I was on Wall Street for 13 years and I was making a lot of money. And at that season of my life, that's what I attributed to be success. And just to be clear for your listeners in the audience, making money is absolutely a part of success, but it's not the only part. And I just, you know, nothing too catastrophic happened. I didn't like get my arm blown off in war or anything like that, or divorce. My pain was my pain. And I got to a point where I was just waking up and I was miserable. And Wall Street was a lot of fun until it wasn't. And I just wanted to contribute and make an impact. And I wasn't really doing that. And about 3 years ago, right before the pandemic, I got into a pretty dark season. I just got out of a toxic relationship. As you guys know, it's never fun. And my best friend, my dad, had just gotten diagnosed with cancer. And on top of that, even though I had my own business, which I'm super grateful for, I didn't find meaning and purpose in it, if I'm being honest.
Mhm.
And so my pain was my pain. And as I imagine you can attest to, spiritual and emotional pain is far worse than physical pain. And so I started drinking more than I'd like to admit, but I didn't stay there long. I don't know if I found running or running found me, but I believe there's always something in between. And running for me was that catalyst or gateway drug, if you will, to really start to find myself, to wake up with purpose, inspired. And I started running a bunch of marathons. It was awesome. And I wasn't looking to become a professional or anything like that. I was just looking to find myself. And I did. And then the pandemic happened, specifically the lockdown, and obviously a global awakening. But for me personally, I looked at this as a historic opportunity to kind of reassess. And it occurred to me when I did my eulogy exercise, which is essentially if this was it for us, and it's good for all the listeners to do, if this was it for you, what kind of legacy did you leave? What kind of contribution did you make? What kind of impact did you make? And it occurred to me at that moment that none, really. I had some good relationships. That was about it. And I had been underachieving for quite some time. And I believe all of us are here for a much bigger purpose than most of us realize. In addition, we all have very unique, special gifts. And so when I took that time to be available, I started getting the downloads and I was able to put it all together, and I've been obsessed with personal development for so long. People think CLS was an overnight success. I just finally put it together. I hit the ground running. For me, the cost of inaction was way too high, the COI. So I took my shot and the brand exploded. I sold the Wall Street business, and this is it for me. Also got engaged. It wasn't just a career reinvention, it was a life. But you asked me what my pain was. And I think it's interesting, and I want to land the plane with I just was underachieving and I didn't have much purpose and meaning in life. And I think that's everything. And that's the reason why there's blue zones in the world and people consistently live to 100 because they have purpose. And
Mhm.
then people that retire early and they retire from their purpose, and all of a sudden their average life expectancy goes down significantly. I don't think that's a coincidence, right? Like the sperm without the egg is useless. And additionally, life without purpose is useless. And at that season, my pain was I lacked purpose.
Mhm. No, that's so beautiful. Yeah, the Japanese call it isekai, I believe. So it's one of the main principles of why that community can live past 100, and it's very normal. It's they're integrated into society. They're not pushed out into these homes. Like they still are gardening and contributing to the household and helping out family members. It's really weird kind of the way that the West deals with aging. It's almost we are supposed to waste our entire youth to work for somebody else with something that really doesn't give you a sense of fulfillment or passion or contribution to then retire and do nothing. You're like, that sounds horrible. I don't know that that's something that I want to do. I would get bored out of my mind. What do you mean do nothing? So I think you can find something that you have a skill set for, a passion for, and still make money. For some reason, we separate that. We're like, you can't do something that you love and that contributes and that you get paid on. So when it comes to realizing that you wanted to incorporate some sense of contribution into your work, do you think that you can have fulfillment without that element?
No, I think you have to love what you do, and there's got to be a reason that's driving you. Otherwise, fulfillment will be temporary, right? And you just said something so beautiful, and I want to acknowledge you and reiterate. I think there's a big misconception that people think that you can't do what you love and also monetize it. And I hope that I could be proof of concept that that's absolutely untrue. And just to be clear, I have contrast because I used to believe that too. And when people used to say, find what you love and you'll never work a day in your life, I said, like, right. In my head, I'm like, it'll always be a job. And I'm glad I was wrong because anybody listening to this right now, you can absolutely create a hybrid of making a massive impact, having a lot of fun, and unapologetically making a lot of money. I believe when you're so passionate and excited about something, you don't have to worry so much about the how. Making money will end up just being an energetic exchange. It's a byproduct because you love what you do. I don't care if you love to talk about insects. You could start a blog, you could start a podcast, you can do anything. And literally, anything that you love, if you're determined enough to see it through, you'll figure out a way to sell it or people will want a piece of it. My purpose 13, 15 years ago was to make money. And I essentially, I accomplished that at the time, but it was short lived because you realize that money isn't everything. And so I think everybody should find what they love and what they're really excited about. And then you'll never really get burnt out. You'll never really have too big of setbacks because you have a really strong why and a really strong who you are, what your identity is, why you're doing it in the first place. So for anyone listening, could you make a lot of money and do something that you're not super passionate about it? Sure, we see it all the time. But then I ask you this, is that person successful if they're not happy? I don't think so. So I think you should absolutely find what has you doing a triple backflip out of bed every day, something that excites you, that has you feeling a lit soul. And just to be clear, like I used to think that once I got the things, the watch, the pretty girl, the money, whatever, then I'd activate the lit soul. I was mistaken. First, you activate your lit soul, and then, ironically, you end up manifesting all the things that you thought you needed to activate that lit soul. So, based upon my life experience, I would highly suggest everybody identify what sets their soul on fire. And as I like to say, it doesn't take time, it just takes alignment.
A lot of people will answer that question when it comes to who am I, that fundamental philosophical spiritual question that seems simple, but when you go to answer it, and I have, I guess for lack of better words, failed at this exercise many times over, and I'm like still trying to fine tune it because it's almost reflexive that you start to answer it with your roles, and it's not your actual essence, or it's not your actual soul or your spirit or the thing that's your core. It's I'm a mom, so that's my function. I'm a wife, that's my function. I have a podcast, that's another function. Instead of, well, if I strip all of those things away, they're still you, right? Like you aren't your name or your age. Like these things are all kind of like prescribed to you. So how do you get down to like, your actual essence before you go after your new passion or um what were you saying, like your lit soul, like finding your lit soul? Yeah.
Yeah. You know the feeling when you're lit up. Like for me, this isn't work to me. Like having this great conversation with you, like there's nowhere else in the world I'd rather be. So I believe we're all part of the infinite and the collective.
Mhm.
And this like 5 foot 7.5 handsome vessel that's speaking to you right now, depending upon your taste, uh, it's just a vessel that's
Mhm.
holding my soul and my spirit. And I believe it to be true with everybody, right? So you got to find your purpose and identify what that is, and then fulfill your assignment by leaning into that. And that's when the magic happens. That's when you're a vibrational match for all the abundance out there, and all the things start coming towards you because it feels easy. You're in alignment, so to speak. So I also like what you said there in regards to identity. Like I've had a bunch of professional athletes on the podcast and so forth, and they'll say, football is what I did, or basketball is what I did. It's not who I am,
Mhm.
right? And that's really groundbreaking stuff, and I love that, and I agree, and I believe we're all looking to find out why we're here. And it's our purpose to identify what that is and then impact the world with it, unapologetically make a lot of money, and obviously open our heart. But you'll know when you find it. And for those of you guys that are listening right now and you're like, sounds good for you, you found it. Well, just to be clear, it took me 35 years, but better late than never. And I never gave up trying to find it. And then also, look what happened in a little over 2 years. I say very humbly, the brand has exploded. I'm having more fun than I ever had in my life. I've grown more. Ironically, I make more money than I ever made in my life. Like I said, it's just an energetic exchange. So you want to lean into that. And I believe you should never stop searching for what that is. And if you really can't figure out what it is, I would give you an exercise that's tangible right now, and I would make a list of 5 to 10 things that you absolutely love. Like if you could wake up tomorrow and not worry about money, what would you want to do? And then make another list and name 5 to 10 of your best skill sets. And somewhere in between, there's going to be something that you could sink your teeth into.
Mhm. No, that's very, very useful. The way that you talk about money is really interesting. So you say it's an energetic exchange, and I feel like a lot of people maybe have a negative or scarcity mindset or the angst, fear. There's just like a lot of really heavy emotions tied to money. So maybe you don't have it because you don't want it, and you like you secretly you think money is the root of all evil. Maybe that's something that you prescribe to. So then you kind of actively or subconsciously push it away, or maybe it's something that you're clenching onto super tight, like a whole bunch of sand, and it's slipping out no matter what because you have like this very greedy relationship with it. Maybe you find yourself in a job that you don't love, but you won't leave because you don't believe in yourself and believe that it is abundant. and you can create it somewhere else. So, what are like the first steps in being able to reprogram your relationship with money and look at it like a tool?
Yeah, first and foremost, realize that it's not really like this physical thing. It's
Mhm.
energy, and the more you put out, the more that comes in. And just understand that. And like you can't. The reason why lottery winners, the statistics show like they end up bankrupt like very soon after that, or they don't sustain it, or all this stuff, is because their container isn't big enough to hold all the wealth that just comes into their hands. Right? You have to grow your container. In other words, your worthiness. You can never
Mhm.
outgrow your own self worth. So you have to believe that you deserve to have that stuff, that wealth, whatever the case may be. And also, learning how to receive is a skill set and a muscle that can be developed, right? So if you don't really believe that you deserve to make money, you might have one great business deal, or something might happen, but chances are you're going to lose that because you're not built to sustain it, right? So it all comes with beliefs. Most of the people have these limiting beliefs based upon society or upbringing, or your parents when you were a kid talking about scarcity or money in a negative light, and that got ingrained in your DNA. So we have to uninstall that programming and then reinstall new programming, right? Like I'm a big believer in that adding value gets you rich. So whatever it is that you're going to add value to, there's going to be someone there that wants your services or product, or wants a piece of you, or wants to be able to work with you, and so forth. So this just comes to conditioning and reframing how you've been taught, or how you subconsciously began to feel about money, and then realizing if you're not attracting it, you've, just like you said, you've built up some sort of energetic resistance. Maybe you want it so bad you fear not having it, that there's resistance there. So let's be aware of that, and let's remove that, and let's start implementing more positive, productive thoughts and beliefs. I am worthy. It's just an energetic exchange. Money isn't a thing. It's just in exchange for all the stuff that I'm doing, and you can develop it like a muscle. And then obviously there's affirmations and stuff like that. But depending upon if you like those, sometimes it can sound a little corny, but whatever works for you. But just understand that it's a belief and it could be changed.
Do you think that there's power in affirmations? Because so I have this spiritual teacher kind of mentor that I work with, and one of the exercises he is hounding on me to do is this mirror affirmation exercise, and he wants me to do it a couple times a day, and I still haven't done it. And he's like, "I know you're not doing them." I'm like, "No, I'm not doing them because I feel ridiculous doing them. Like I tried it once and I just felt silly." And he's like, "Well, it's because you're not doing it enough." But then I hear other people that rave about it and they think that it really helps with their internal dialogue.
I personally love affirmations. If you come to my New York City apartment, you will see them everywhere, literally everywhere. And the irony is I had them all up before I made personal development my career. I
Mhm.
was studying personal development for so long, it probably kept me afloat. Then I realized that it was more than just a passion; it was my purpose. But I'm huge. I'm a really big believer in affirmations. And if you can combine the spiritual and practical, and I would suggest to you to lean into it a little bit,
Mhm.
I think it's really powerful. Like, for example, just the very fact that in life we don't get what we want, we get what we're committed to, right? So if you start to affirm what you're committed to, just creating a little bit of a template, like I'm committed to blank, no matter what, there is no other option. Now all of a sudden you start believing like I'm destined to achieve that. Now we just have to reverse engineer it and figure out how. And then you can affirm, okay, so now by keeping it top of mind, you recommit to this every single day. And then saying, well, why is this a must for you? Writing down some bullet points. So it changes the language in your head. And also, if you see something long enough, you're going to start to believe it. Just simple affirmations like, I am worthy, I can do this. I remember right when I started speaking, before a speaking engagement, I'd walk around and saying, I am a gladiator, this is my arena. Whatever it is, I'm weird and I'm strange, but it got me excited. It got me going. I have things on my mirror all the time. I think it's so important to be intentional and strategic with the language that you say to yourself, because most of the thoughts we have are negative, but here's the kicker: thoughts are not facts. So why not start choosing positive affirmations and essentially brainwash yourself into being positive and thinking that you're worthy? And eventually you do it long enough, you start to believe that, and then the results showcase themselves. So I'm a big believer in them.
Yeah, it's interesting that you use the word commitment and like what you're committed to because I naturally I start to think about like I look at that with a positive light, and I'm like, okay, what are you committed to achieving? What are your goals? If you're committed to a partner, like those very typical top of mind things. But in an exercise I did the other day, you can kind of catch your automatic negative thoughts, or like ants, as Jim Quick would call them, and you find yourself committed to that. Like, I'm committed to seeing everything with like maybe like a cynical perspective. Or if I get into a fight with my husband, then I'm committed to staying angry instead of getting over the thing. And I'll be like, but you wrote down this thing and I can't get over this thing. And then my mentor would be like, well, you seem very committed to staying angry. And I was like, damn it, he's right. And why? And there's so much ego attached to it. And you're like, well, where's that coming from? Because I don't want to stay mad at my husband. Like, I would like to get over this stupid fight. But I have this other this other narrator in my mind that's like, oh, well, this was written down, so you should stay mad at that. So it's like, you get to decide what your commitment is. And do you want that commitment to be for growth, or do you want to dig your heels in and commit to being, quote, right?
100%. And also, like, think about the pros and cons of staying committed to ants, as you say. Like, where's that going to lead you? You're going to have a pessimistic outlook. You're going to always be looking at things with the glass half empty, right? And we know how that goes. So why not be excited about committing to looking at things optimistically? I like to call myself delusionally optimistic, because I just choose to be available for what can go right. And oftentimes I'm not really thinking about the stuff that could potentially go wrong. I spent a long time in that frequency, and it didn't really get me very far. So
Hmm.
now I just look at all the positives, and I look to be problem solving and resourceful. So you're absolutely right. People are committed often to negativity. And so, to be honest with you, like my parents, God bless them, I love them so much. They're a lot older. They had me a little bit later, and my brother, my best friend's a little bit older than me, but they're so pessimistic often. With them, I know what I'm getting myself into, and I love them very much, but they're just so committed to having a pessimistic outlook. I just can, for everyone listening right now, I would challenge you to consider the alternative, being super optimistic. And I would try that for 24 hours. And the irony is after that 24 hours of being super optimistic, after going back to being realistic, I think that what you'll notice is that when you were being realistic, you were being more pessimistic, and choosing to be delusionally optimistic or even just optimistic is a lot better quality of life.
Yeah, that's kind of what upward spiraling is in psychology. Are you familiar with that?
No, but it sounds great.
Yes. See, there's your optimism shining through naturally. It's when you catch yourself, you'll be in this flow of negativity and those automatic negative thoughts, and it's very hard to catch, especially they say like 90% of our thoughts throughout the day are repeated. Like every single day they're repeated. So there's not a lot of nuance that's going on in our minds unless you actively search for it. But it's interrupting that negative thought pattern, and instead of focusing on something negative, you inject something positive. So if you're like, oh my god, the dog just peed there again or something, you're like, oh well, at least she's still here. And obviously I'm using my own personal experience because I have a 13-year-old dog that I have to try to upward spiral all the time with.
Uh,
But you can do it with anything in your life. So you find some place that you're like, oh my gosh, the kids are screaming again, and just interject some kind of positive light there instead of going on this automatic negative train. And it's supposed to help you start to develop more of an optimistic lens naturally.
just like anything, it's conditioning, right? It takes a
Hmm.
commitment, and it takes compounding every
Hmm.
single day. And eventually, it becomes second nature to you. And in regards to your dog, my fiance, we just got a brand new puppy who's about 3.5 months old, and he's the cutest thing ever. But I will say it's a full time job. But it's funny because I can relate to you, but they're on two different ends of the spectrum. One's 3.5 months, but everyone should have a dog. My personal opinion.
Yeah, they're great. They teach you a lot. I feel like my oldest right now is really teaching me unconditional love. She's like, "Do you really know what that means? Are you going to really act on it, or are all these aging inconveniences going to interrupt what that is supposed to be?"
And it's so good for your mental health, if I'm being
Hmm.
honest.
Oh yeah, and your physical health. Like, it helps with your heart health. It helps with your mental health.
Having a dog,
Yeah,
love it.
yeah. And then if you decide to have children, it helps with their immune system and their allergies. Yeah, pets are great.
Wow, I didn't know all that, but I'm certainly glad that I mentioned that. So that's awesome. Good to know.
Yeah. So when it comes to parents, I think that's an interesting transition. So someone like you who works a lot on personal development, constantly growing, evolving, trying to be better, how do you navigate relationships if you especially are dealing with maybe older parents or older people or just people around you that aren't committed to growth and change? I feel like those relationships tend to get more difficult, at least for me. They tend to get more difficult, more trying, and more frustrating because I'm offering a new perspective, or I'm offering something I learned, or a book that I read, or a podcast I listened to, or maybe I'm trying to parent in a different way than I was parented, and it's met with a lot of resistance or a lot of, well, you're still alive, or a lot of negativity. And for me, it's really frustrating because I have two little kids now, and I'm hyper vigilant about who's around them, what's being said, how people talk to them, like what's being installed for their inner narrator, because they say like your parents' voices or the caretakers' voices are what you tend to hear in adulthood, which is really interesting because most of it is negative. um, and I'm like, well, I just don't know what to do because you can't make people change. Again, that's an inside job. But certain people you love and you don't want to remove them from your inner circle. But it's like, what do you do? I'm in like a quagmire, essentially.
First of all, I have to ask you, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
33.
Look great. Truth
Thanks.
tell, 33 years young and just getting warmed up.
Yeah.
In regards to, it's a great topic. Look, for me, when I speak to my parents, which is every day, they're dealing with some health stuff and stuff like that, and they're older. I know what I'm getting myself into, and
Hmm.
I will never stop trying to showcase an alternative perspective sometimes. And
Hmm.
so I believe it's paid off with my dad as he battles and defies the odds with cancer and so forth. In regards to people that are not my parents, I'm very selective and intentional, specifically since I reinvented myself. And I don't just
Hmm.
mean the career, but like I've grown so much. And I'm not the same cat I was 3 months ago, if I'm being honest with you. Like I'm
Hmm.
growing so rapidly right now. And it's not necessarily that you're outgrowing people because they have an opportunity to grow with you. But if people just aren't on my frequency, I have to be super intentional with who I allow into my bubble of serenity. And I was having a coaching call today, actually, and one of my clients was dealing with something like this. And I'm like, look, this is your movie. You're the star. Essentially, everyone else in it are just extras, just like you are an extra in someone else's movie, right? So consider that when you allow stuff to bother you so much. And what I mean by that is like if somebody's not vibing with you, you have to make some difficult choices and decisions. And ultimately, for me, I want to be around people that are on a similar vibes, similar frequency, very growth oriented, optimistic, and I'm going at a similar path with. And it doesn't mean that I think I'm better than the other people that I'm kind of outgrowing. I'm different. I'm growing and I don't have as much in common with them. So in regards to my parents, they get a hall pass. In
Hmm.
regards to other people, like if they're just not open to,
Hmm.
to seeing a different perspective or trying to be optimistic and for whatever reason, when I'm with them, I pay attention to the way I feel. If I feel myself in a lower frequency, then I have a decision to make, right? And I need to allocate my energy elsewhere. And I'm a big believer in that. And I would suggest that to other people as well.
Hmm. Yeah, and the power of influence too, right? It's when you start working on yourself like that, it does kind of have this bleeding over effect where you will hopefully start to uplift those around you and inspire them to maybe start doing some kind of personal development or seek out spirituality or whatever that thing is, and not just settle with complacency or settle with negativity. It's so frustrating for me because I feel like, so I'm in North Carolina. I obviously have the podcast. It's not a huge podcasting town, so sometimes I feel like I'm on the edges, kind of watching all the action happen in like these bigger cities. And then I have some great friends, and then I also have some great friends that I love that have, maybe some bad habits. And for me, it's, I guess, trying to lead with example, but you just like notice people and how they can kind of get stuck in judgment and judgment of others. And I don't know. For me, it's like, again, just trying to be really mindful of your vibration and how you feel in certain environments and being honest with that and saying sometimes maybe I don't go out to dinner with these people as often, even though I love them. It's just not the energy I want to be around. Like if everyone's gossiping and talking terrible about other people, that doesn't make me feel good because I don't do that to other people. So like if I'm not at the table, am I the subject of this gossip? Like all these questions start to come up. So just being really mindful about who you surround yourself with, and understanding it's not necessarily that you don't love them anymore or you don't care about them, but it's also just like prioritizing yourself and your energy.
I couldn't agree more, right? And it's like it goes back to the old analogy on the airplane when the stewardess will say, like, put your oxygen mask on first before you help your kids or significant others. Why? Because they need you to be good and operating on a good level so that you could then help other people. So if you're constantly getting drained or depleted by being around specific people's energies, then you're no good to the world, respectfully. So yeah, as you continue to grow and spread your wings, you have to be intentional. And look, just the simple concept that most people in your life are a season and a reason, right?
Mm,
And you're extras in your movie, so to speak. So you got to be intentional, and you have to decide: do you want to feel good or not so good all the time? And ultimately lean into that. I agree with you.
mhm. So how do you avoid I feel like when it comes to personal development, there's ways in which there's the healthy framing, and then there's also for maybe someone who's not necessarily ready for the content, right? Because you can give the same book to two different people, and one person takes it for what it was supposed to be, and they take it in this very positive, orienting fashion, and another one can read the same book and then immediately kind of try on this lens of victimhood, and I'm not responsible, it's my trauma, it's my lineage, it's my epigenetics. There's like if they're not necessarily ready for it. So if you see this personal development content online, how do you avoid like that narcissistic trap of, well, I want to feel good, so I'm not going to do this, instead of understanding that it's properly calibrated, I guess, for lack of better words. Like it's calibrated in your best interest, your family's best interest, not in like this my feelings are prioritizing everything else.
Yeah, look, you have decisions to make, right? In regards to, I want to give everybody a chance, right? Like my fiance, she's from Ukraine. She's a little bit more of a savage than me, and it's a good balance. Sometimes she's like, Craig, not everyone deserves like your support, or sometimes you believe too much in people and they end up letting you down. And she's not wrong, but I just choose to see the good in humanity, and I want to give everybody an opportunity. But how many times can you go back to the same well and not feel good, and then not go elsewhere? I mean,
Mhm,
that's on you, right? So you got to be aware. And what I'd say is hang out with your feelings, right? And pay attention to how you feel when you're around certain people or certain places or things.
mhm,
And ultimately, you have to lean into what feels good. And I understand that that's going to hurt some people's feelings. I totally get that. But what is the alternative? Right? Like walk around feeling crappy. I don't think that's you're doing us good for the world at all.
mhm,
So look, we're not going to be here forever. Like forget about souls and spirits. Different conversation in terms of this human experience. Like we got to make every second count. Now, just to be clear, like you have some best friends and people like that, like give them a couple opportunities. But if you don't like the way you feel after, that's feedback and that's data. And you have to install that and then say, okay, I'm going to act accordingly and so forth. So this is something I've really worked on over the last couple of years. And I got to tell you, people are always like, what are you on? Like, how are you always so excited? And I'm super intentional with my inner circle, with who I'm around, with what I consume, right? If you're following people on social media that trigger you, two things. Number one, figure out why it's triggering you. It's probably something within you, if we're being
mhm,
honest. But
mhm,
if that person really makes you feel some type of way, then unfollow them or block them or something like that,
mhm.
right? So you got to pay attention to your feelings because oftentimes they will guide you.
Mhm. That was something that I try to be really intentional about, is my feed on social media. So if I was following people that I would be like it would evoke jealousy for some reason, I'd sit with that and be like, "Well, what's that?" And one of my favorite reframes of jealousy is a lack of imagination for your future potential. So you feel like I'm not going to be able to do that, which is why you have such a strong feeling. So it goes back to fundamentally believing in yourself instead of making it about another person. Or if I see someone who's constantly angry and outraged and just this dense energy, unfollow. Why am I doing that to myself? I don't want to feel those things, and that's not the perspective I want on people or places or things. So just being really intentional about how you who you follow and like what you're rewarding essentially, because I think right now we reward so much outrage content. It's like whoever can be the craziest and the loudest and the meanest is getting all of the views, and I'm like, I don't want to contribute to that. I don't want
No,
to contribute to that at all.
I agree with you 100%. Yeah, you got to make your own value system, right? Your core values and so forth,
Mm-hmm.
and subscribe to that. But I do like what you said in regards to if somebody specifically is triggering you, like sit with that for a second and figure out why, because it's ultimately a reflection on you,
Mm-hmm.
and then see if you can transform that. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you just put it aside, it'll never really leave. It'll come back to haunt you in some capacity down the road. So you want to see if you can transform the way you feel about that. I would highly suggest that to everyone, first and
So,
foremost.
have you
Go ahead.
had have you had to deal with comparisons? Like, obviously, you're in this digital content creating space, you're in the podcasting space, and you get to go onto platforms and see other people's metrics. Have you ever been caught in the comparison trap where you're like, this person's getting more likes than mine, this one's getting more shares, more downloads, more followers, etc.?
Yeah, I think comparison is the worst thing going. I think that it leads to unworthiness, which is the biggest virus going today, and I think it's really dangerous. Um, for me, I have a very intentional relationship with social media. When I first started CLS, just because I had success in businesses on Wall Street and marathons was no indication that I was going to blow up doing this. I had 300 Instagram followers at the time, which you can argue is less than zero. I had no connections, no network, but I knew that social media, when I started this in a couple years back, was a great vehicle to utilize to extend your reach, to make an impact, to share content and so forth. So oftentimes throughout my journey, I'm human. I would often see people that are a little bit further ahead. And of course, it makes you feel some type of way for a second. But then ultimately, I have to catch myself and just realize like, they're on chapter 9. I'm on chapter 2. Why am I even comparing myself to them? And who cares? I'm only competing with how I was yesterday. And I'm really big on compounding. Marry the process, divorce the outcome. How can I get a little better each day? Move the chains, first down, compound, and so forth. So to answer your question, I've caught myself at times, but I've gotten a lot better at it. And I try not to take it personally or anything. To be honest with you, for me now, like when I see others winning, I clap because it just showcases what's possible. And for anyone out there that wants to do something, start a side hustle, go all in, be an entrepreneur, anything, and you see saturation, I challenge you to reframe that. Saturation just shows that there's a market for it, and there's always room for the best. So yeah, I've caught myself in the past. I'm very intentional now. I'm much better than I was when I first started at that. And I think this is a really important topic and conversation for everybody because most people on Instagram, on social media, it's just a highlight reel of all the good things. And then all of a sudden you see they get divorced 2 months later. So like go figure, right? So it's generally a facade. So don't get caught up in it. Use it for how you see fit, and make sure you're not getting triggered by certain things. And ultimately, keep in mind that all you're really doing is looking to get better and improve, and should never compare yourself to others because number one, you don't really know what's going on behind social media, and number two, you're not in the same chapter as them.
Yeah, they say if you think that something's oversaturated, go into the bread aisle. And you're like there are hundreds of different kinds of bread, so there's something for everybody, and you don't need to look at it like there's not enough room for me or these people are taking my views or my likes or my downloads. Like there's plenty to go around, and to approach it with more of an abundant mindset. I'm also from like more of like an energetic quantum level. They say that when you are looking at someone else and instead of clapping for them and instead of being excited for someone else's success, if you're like, oh, why them, or they suck, or that's why not me, you're kind of charging this, that you're charging success with negativity, so then
Mm,
you're almost repelling it for yourself, so you're constantly going to be in this place where you're like grasping and just missing, and that's because you have like that hater mentality around it. So that's like the more spiritual quantum level of why you should be like someone who's excited for other people and like approach it not like how they're taking pieces of my pie. It's make more pies. You can always make more pies.
that's it. And I'm very spiritual and I love the quantum stuff. So I couldn't agree more. And ultimately, it'll research. You have to correct that thought. That's ego, right?
Mm,
So if you don't, I agree with you. You're going to stay in that scarcity playing field, so to speak, and let that shit go, for lack of better words, and
mhm.
realize there's more than enough for everybody to win. The market already exists. You just have to call it in and block out the interference. So often, if you see other people winning, I challenge the audience to clap for them. And you don't have to actually send them a message. Even like if there's people out there that you don't like, which I imagine as a human, there's always someone, even if you see them winning, like just have the mindset like, okay, game recognized game. I see you. You're showcasing what's possible. It's only a matter of time before I catch up or surpass you, whatever your thing is. But ultimately, there you got to think abundantly. There's more than enough to go around. 100%.
So you mentioned that unworthiness is one of the biggest viruses that we are dealing with. And I 100% agree with you. I think a lot of us suffer from some kind of feeling of not being good enough. And something I've noticed that you're really great at is receiving. And a lot of people struggle with that. I've seen podcasts with you and someone will pay you a compliment. You're like, I'm going to receive that. Like, I'm going to take that. I'm going to accept that. And so many of us, if someone pays us a compliment, we kind of close off, we hunch over, like, oh, I don't like, okay, let's talk about you, let's switch the subject. We don't receive it at all. We are so quick to deflect anything positive our way because we have that inherent unworthiness, where if we did feel good enough, we would do what you're doing, which is like, yeah, I'll receive that, I'll take that shit all day, thank you so much. uh, how do you get to a place where you can be so comfortable with compliments
I
and
just work on my
praise?
Yeah, I work on myself every single day till I'm
Hmm.
blue in the face, and I've been working on myself. And I just understood that you got to learn how to receive. If you want to like make billions or whatever it is your thing, and find the correct partner and have all the things and all the manifestations. I mean, just to be clear, everybody should have it all. They shouldn't be like lacking in certain areas. You should have it all. You should strive for that. You have to believe it. And then when someone pays you a compliment, something that I've really worked on is to not brush it off and just say, you know what, I'm gonna really feel that for a second. Thank you for that. I remember at our last live event in February, through a big event in New York City, and I was doing my keynote. I was finishing up a speaking, and I just paused. I'm like, guys, I'm just gonna take a second. And I just stood there and I'm like, this is awesome. Everyone traveled from England all over the world just for this event. And it was beautiful. And something that I'm learning to get much better at is being mindful and present. In my opinion, mindfulness is the portal to expansion and just being in the moment. Like, I'm not worried about my next meeting or what happened 40 minutes ago. It's just me and you right now. I just want to build rapport and deliver and have a great conversation. So being mindful and present and being able to receive a nice compliment when it comes your way is a muscle that can be developed, and it feels good. And I would highly suggest everybody lean into that as well.
Do you have a mindfulness practice or a meditation practice that you do?
For me, running is a
Mhm,
moving meditation. I
mhm,
run about 5 days a week. The days I don't run, I just go upstairs and work out. That's when I do my best, like strategizing, thinking, creative divine downloads, connected to God, all that stuff. That's when I do that. Do I sit like somewhere specifically and carve out 15, 20 minutes a day to meditate? No. I tried it. It wasn't really my thing. Just to be clear, I could probably get better at it if I paid it more attention, but I just don't specifically. But I pray to God every single day in the mornings, and that's kind of like become slash medication, meditation routine, so forth. But for me, working out and moving, and once in a while, if time permits, I'll go on a nice walk in New York City. That's when I do my best thinking and I'm so mindful and present. But I don't actually like sit somewhere and meditate, if that's what you mean physically,
mhm.
on a day to day basis. And I know that might surprise people, but I'm curious. How about you?
It does surprise me, yeah. I thought you were gonna have something. I do agree that running is it's like a moving meditation, and those things are immensely beneficial. They like a lot of inventors, like Thomas Edison would walk the garden and like he would walk very intentionally and slowly and be very present, and that's where he came up with a lot of his downloads as well. So there is something to moving and being very present in your movements. I think that something different happens when you're forced to be still, and that's something that is really difficult for me. I found this form of meditation that I it's better than anything I've tried, and I've tried pretty much everything. My husband is a Jedi when it comes to meditating. He is just excellent at it. He has pretty bad ADD, so it's the thing that helps him really take control of that. So he has like a very strict regimen, and I haven't had that external motivator. So I'm like, I don't really need it. So I've tried everything. This woman, Emily Fletcher, founded Ziva, which was actually one of the first online meditations, and it's been endorsed by Andrew Huberman, by Jim Quick. She's just really well known. She's very spiritual as well, and it's this combination of mindfulness and meditation. And the way that she describes it made me totally reframe the way that I thought about meditating, because I always thought if I have thoughts, then I'm sucking at this. I'm failing at this thing that is supposed to be meditating. And she's like, no, 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 no. So if she kind of equates it to Newton's third law, which is every action has an opposite equal reaction. So you start with this mantra, and it starts loud, and the goal is that it kind of gets slower and slower and slower, and eventually you don't even realize that it's happening, and you enter this bliss field. And then like that's like the ooey gooey, my body feels amazing, and I'm just totally present, and I'm me in this moment. Like there's no ego, and you're just kind of in this amazing state. But then all of a sudden you start to notice this thought bubble get louder and louder and louder and louder, and she equates that to like a toxic release or some kind of emotional release. And she's like, no, it's beautiful, that means it's working. So then when you notice that that thought is really loud, you just go back over to loud mantra, and it just circles, and it just circles. And that entire process is meditation. And the very first day that I did her course, like the very first day, I was in this chair, and I was like, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to work. These never do. And within a couple of minutes, I almost like hit my head on the table, because I am just so like relaxed and zenned out. I wasn't sleeping, totally aware, but my body was in such a state of like resetting my nervous system, which is constantly in fight or flight for me. And it was like, oh my gosh, I needed this so bad. So it was like, thank you, thank you, thank you. So anyone that has, the same thought that I used to have around meditation, I highly recommend her course, and it's super affordable. And if it's good enough for the daddy of science, which is Andrew Huberman, it's good enough. It's good enough for me. So I definitely recommend that.
Heck yeah, that's awesome. And I'm happy that it worked for you.
Thank you. Yeah. Um, So when it comes to these downloads that you're talking about, I think it's really important that you do have something like you're running or something like meditation where you don't have distractions and you are left with your mind, because you do get a lot of creative thought. I was reading this, I think it was called The Art of a Happy Life. It was one of those Stoic books, and it was essentially saying that virtue isn't, it's not a noun, it's a doing. So in order to develop what they defined as virtue, is you had to go into like this room, and or you could even be running, but you essentially had to be by yourself and quiet and strip away a lot of programming that people put on top of you, whether it's like, I don't know, like you have to get married before you have sex, or like you have to vote this way, otherwise you're a bad person. Whatever, like these cultural narratives or parental narratives are placed upon you, strip all of that away, and then you sit with like, what do I want to do in life, and like essentially finding your purpose. Um, so like what I want to be an honest person. I want to be someone that contributes. I want to work with animals, whatever it is. And you go back into life with those three principles, and then you like slowly build upon it. And then that's where you can kind of create your purpose, sense of identity, find your essence. And I just found that to be, I don't know, it just like felt kismet to me, because I've been really trying to focus on that becoming instead of I am, if that makes sense.
Look, when, in the pandemic is when I put this thing all together and started CLS and totally reinvented my life. And to be honest, had it not been for the world standing still, causing me to stand still, I don't know if this thing would have happened, or at least when it did. I was go 100 miles, 400 miles an hour, and I was miserable, and I just didn't take time to reassess or even to consider alternatives. And when I got really quiet is when I was available, and I started getting all these creative divine downloads,
Hmm.
and it just kept going, boom. So I know that to be true, and I can't stress it enough for anyone listening today to have some sort of practice or system in place where they have an opportunity to get quiet and mindful and allow those creative divine downloads to come through you.
Yeah, and I think movement too. So I think the beautiful thing about what you're doing is incorporating both things. So for me, when I was probably at one of my lowest mental points, just total, like pretty much full-blown depression. It was right after I had my second baby, and I struggled to call it depression, because I could go on forever about how fucked up I think the entire system is of how we treat women when they have kids, and like there is no support system whatsoever. We have completely eliminated the tribe. Like that doesn't exist. Never in the history of mankind would you have a woman that gave birth and then send her to go take care of a baby by herself. Like it just wouldn't happen. And like I have an awesome husband, but we also have a toddler. You know what I mean? So it's like it's not. It was never supposed to be just just like a nuclear family. It was supposed to be this communal tribal thing, and we don't have that anymore. So is it depression, or is it that like our system is kind of fucked? I don't really know. But in the thick of it, it was, I guess, like feeling enough pain and being able to say, this isn't me. This isn't what I want to feel. This isn't how, like, this is not the life that I want to live. This isn't the person I want to be. And I would see other people, and I use that as a motivating factor. So instead, I was like, I know I'm fucking exhausted. Don't even have enough energy to cook a meal right now, but if I force myself to move, I know I'm going to feel better. And just like trusting that brain chemistry was going to kick in and those endorphins were going to kick in. And it's really difficult because you'll have everything in your mind telling you not to, right? Like your ego and like your mind can kind of be your own worst enemy, and they can kind of sabotage you, and we have a tendency to self-sabotage. But it's being able to separate yourself from your thoughts and say, no, that's just my thoughts, that's not serving me, and I need to get my ass out of this bed and I need to fucking move. And that's going to make me feel better. And I think once I started getting back into a workout routine, that was like the first really big change that helped shift me into a much healthier place. But if I had just validated my feelings and said, no, I feel terrible, I feel tired, I'm not going to do it, I'll do it when I get energy, I probably wouldn't be where I'm at right now. I'd probably still be like a lot less vibrant, a lot less energetic, certainly a lot less happy. So it's being able to spot your own bullshit. You know what
Mhm.
I mean?
Hell yeah. Love the way
Mhm.
you worded that, and I agree.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think a lot of us aren't moving. If we're honest, it's like how many steps did you take today? Did you work out, or are you finding excuses? Because if you don't have the energy, it's because you're not moving.
Yeah, I know that to be true. I always look to get even more. Like if I have like a minute in between meetings or speaking engagements, whatever the case may be, coaching calls, I like to get outside just for a little bit, just walk a couple blocks, do some thinking, connect to God, whatever the case may be, because I know that to be true, what you just beautifully illustrated. And I didn't know that back in the day. So it's a really great tangible tool for anyone to apply immediately to do some of their best thinking is to get out and move.
So when it comes to this idea of self-sabotage or like this unworthiness, how do you help your clients like first recognize it? Because a lot of times I feel it's very subconscious or subliminal, and it's not easy to spot.
Yeah, it comes down to awareness, right? Because you can't change it if you can't see it. So if you would ask someone why they're not where they want to be, they're going to come up with probably 10 awesome excuses, totally full of bullshit, right? That it's not really true. But what is it really? It's this story or movie that's replaying in their head that they're so invested in. And I speak from contrast because I spent years thinking, is this it for me? Wall Street, I'll make a certain amount of money. I'll never really find true love. All that stuff on social media is not real. And that's just what it was. I was so invested in the story. In the lockdown, when I got quiet and I considered a different choice, that maybe I can buy into a new story or a new movie and triple down on that. I am worthy. Why not me? How good can I stand it? How good can it get? What does that look like if I'm doing what I love and so forth? And then I started choosing and buying into that story, and everything changed literally immediately, right? That's when I started to understand how to manifest and all that stuff. So, first and foremost, we have to be aware that whatever limiting beliefs that we have, they're not real. They're
Mhm.
just beliefs, whether in our subconscious or that just over time that we put so much stock into. And if we can just consider for one moment that we have a choice to choose a different belief, we can now give that thing some life. And then we can
Mhm.
run with that. And then we can start talking strategies and tactics. So you have to be aware that if you're not where you want to be, that's by design and that's your choice. And most likely it's because you can't outgrow your own self worth. So once we can start doing that and building our worthiness and our capacity for what we can achieve, then we can start to uninstall all those nonsense limiting beliefs that we've cultivated over time. And that's where everything opens up.
Yeah, and what I find so interesting, just from an anecdotal level, just people that I know, it's they so easily would in the past brush off things like personal development or meditation or working out, and they would instead were coming from this place of lack, like I need a partner. Why can't I find somebody? Why can't I find the love of my life? How do I do that? And they were just so focused on getting this one thing, and that one thing was going to make them happy. And then it took a certain level of either like failed attempts or pain to realize like I need to try something new. They start focusing on themselves, developing themselves, and all of a sudden within, a couple months they met their now fiance or their now husband. And it's so simple. It's like often if you're too narrowly focused on this thing and that thing is you think is going to be the source of your happiness, you're never going to get it. Or if you do, it's not going to really change anything on how you feel, how you think, or your perception of who you are. But once you start growing and working on yourself is when you actually start to manifest those things and feel and embody real change.
You nailed it. That's why I said earlier, like you have to activate the lit soul first. Then you manifest all the things that you thought you needed to activate that lit soul. The roots create the fruits, essentially.
Yeah, I wanted to one of the last things I wanted to touch on was this eulogy exercise that you did. And can you walk through how someone would like what is the exercise? What are the benefits of it, and how often do you revisit it?
Yeah, I only did it in the beginning of the pandemic
Mm-hmm.
because that's really all I needed to do at that time to change
Mm-hmm.
my life. And basically, it's very deep. And essentially, for the audience and your listeners, let's just say 2 weeks from now, it was over for you. The human experience has come to an end, and people are gathering around at your funeral. Number one, who would be there? And number two, what would be said? What would be the consensus? Did you leave a legacy? Did you make an impact? Did you make a contribution? Did you have great relationships? And this is where you can really collect honest inventory and do a deep dive. And you have to be brutally honest. That's the only way this is going to work. And for me, when I did that, the honest truth was is that I did not leave a legacy. I did not make much of an impact. I did not contribute to the world, and my relationships were all right, if I'm being honest. And so I'm like, I can't go out like that. So what I want to do is find out what I love and what I'm good at and contribute and make an impact. I know the money will come, or I believe it will, and go from there. And then ironically, like over the last little over 2 years, I can honestly say, like, if this was it for me now, I could hold my head high. I literally gave this thing called life everything I got over the last 2 years. I mean, I got engaged, I fell in love, I opened my heart. I woke up every single day excited. I have a career to die for. I'm making more money than ever made. I'm helping people, millions of people, the podcast, everything we have going on. And I love that. So I don't need to do it again, or at least not right now. But for me, I needed to really do some inner work and reassess and kind of get a different vantage point. And for anyone out there that's listening to this that doesn't feel so happy or excited, it's a great time to take some inventory and see if you check some of those boxes: impact, legacy, contribution, relationships. And if not, what are you going to do about it?
Mhm. Yeah, and you can start small too, right? It's not necessarily quit your job and create a startup and bootstrap the whole thing. It's maybe you just spend some of your free time on a hobby and develop that and see if that's where you want to go. Or maybe it's just weekends, or maybe you volunteer somewhere. Maybe you start to try to get on the board of one of your favorite nonprofits, like instead of starting your own. Like there's all of these other ways that you can do it. And I think for some people too, it's like being honest with how you perceive your work. Like maybe your work sucks. Like maybe that is true and that is universally true. Or maybe it's your attitude that does. So you can shift that instead of saying like, oh, I'm just the assistant, blah, blah, blah. My work has no meaning. It's like, no, I'm useful to all of my colleagues. I'm able to help them like re-energize and nourish themselves by going and picking everyone up coffee and lunch. And you can always reframe things too, especially while you're trying to recalibrate your life and figure out what it is you want to do next. Like you don't have to be stuck in this negative place of my job sucks and they don't appreciate me. Like you can quickly renegotiate that with your own mind.
People say you can find the love in what you do, and you don't necessarily
Mm-hmm.
have to find what you love. I'm okay with that. I
Mm-hmm.
prefer to find what you love because I believe that you'll make it work. Because the passion is so contagious, and your maniacal drive is going to be unmatched because you love it. But I hear you, and I agree. And also, just touch upon, like, you don't have to totally reinvent your career, burn the ships, and leave your job. You're right. You can see how you can make some more impact or contribution elsewhere, or you can change the supporting characters in your movie and form some new relationships. You could definitely do baby steps. The most important thing is that you have awareness. If you're not where you want to be, to take some inspired action towards getting closer to where you want to be.
Right, because some people, there's got to be a lot of fear if you maybe are further into your years than you are. Like, so let's say you're 45 and you've got 3 kids and you've been at the same job for 20 years. You're like, well, I can't burn the boats. My wife will kill me if I burn the boats. So, how do I move forward in a quote responsible way? That isn't necessarily going to jeopardize like the well-being of the family unit. So there's so many different ways that you can approach it and still I don't know, reinvent yourself and reinvent your life.
If it's important to you, you'll find a way. And that might mean canceling your Netflix subscription. And it's not because of the $15 you're going to save a month. It's because of the 2 hours a day you're going to free up. And you can
Mhm.
allocate that towards side hustle or a hobby or a passion project and explore and see where that goes. So I couldn't agree with you more. If it's important to you, you'll find a way.
I love that the time that you prioritized time there and not money. I was like, "Oh, he's not gonna say $15, is he? He's not
Yeah,
gonna say save the $15." Thank God for that. I can't stand those, TikToks and, like, those finance gurus that are like, "If you wanna be a millionaire, stop buying that coffee." I'm like, "Those coffees are not gonna make you a millionaire. You need to" oh, sorry, that's my husband's computer that's always on. Your those Starbucks coffees are not gonna make you a millionaire. You like, how do you create more wealth? How do you generate more value for other people? Not like save on a $5 coffee. That's just energy that you're wasting, in my opinion.
I agree. I think that goes back to think abundance and forget about the scarcity.
Hmm. Uh, uh, there was a thought train I wanted to go on before that computer just rang. I wanted to ask about like your journey to spirituality if you have time. I don't know if you have a heart out. If you do, it's totally cool.
My journey to spirituality.
Yeah. I've seen you talking a lot about quantum and getting really excited about The Secret and the law of attraction, and I'm super into all of that stuff. I think that manifestation is very real. There's this other quote that's been going viral, and I'm not gonna pull it up, but it was like Christians call it prayer, spiritualists call it manifestation, atheists call it placebo. We all call it different words, but no one's denying its existence. And I thought that was so beautiful because it allows a perspective to whatever you subscribe to. But I fully believe in spirituality and manifestation, and I'm just curious, like, what were your first like books or podcasts or people that you ran into that started cultivating that interest?
I'm really spiritually hungry, specifically right now. Like, I just started taking Kabbalah at the Kabbalah Center here in New York, and it's ironic because I used to study Kabbalah years ago, but now that I've turned personal development from a passion to my purpose, now I'm actually going to the center on Wednesday nights, and I'm just loving it. I get off on this stuff. I love it. And there was a big shift for me 2 years ago. I was at a big speaking engagement, and I got injured playing football with the boys before the gig, which was never a good idea. And it came back and it was misdiagnosed. They said I had a sprained ligament, and I was training for a marathon at the time. And my fiance was like, "Get an MRI, get an MRI." I'm like, "All right, fine." And it turns out there was a tumor in my foot. And
Whoa.
yeah, it caught me off guard for sure. Make a long story short, I ended up having to get surgery. It came back benign, thank God. But in those 2 months that I couldn't really be working out, so to speak, I had a little bit of extra time. And it's interesting how you can read a book or watch a movie at different seasons of your life and have a totally different experience. So I reread The Secret at that time, and I just was available this time around. And I've been in the quantum ever since. And I started to really understand energy and intention and just how, like, if you have a thought, it's a possibility, then you take inspired action, it's a probability, and collapsing time and being a vibrational match and blocking out the interference and part of the collective, all that stuff. And then a lot of those guys from the Secret and girls have become some of my best friends, have been on the podcast and so forth. But ultimately, I started to get so confident that I really am just a soul and a spirit having a human experience. I ended up being able to run the New York City Marathon a couple, like maybe 6 weeks after surgery with no physical training. and I ran the fastest I've ran in my life. And I know that that was a quantum experience. I was motivated because I wanted to inspire my pops, who's battling cancer, but I didn't have physical training for 26.2 miles, and yet I was in the quantum, and I just look at life differently now, and I'm really big on energy and frequencies, and it's a vibrational universe. So it was at that moment about 2 years ago that I reread The Secret at a different season of life. And this time around, I was much more available for it. And now I couldn't buy into this stuff anymore. And you talk about faith there. And it's interesting because for me, like faith, for me, it's God. For whoever it is, maybe it's different, but I think we can all agree there's something bigger. Um, whether it's that or the quantum and infinite, I think Abraham Hicks calls it the vortex, stuff like that. I think it's all connected to an extent, but they're both beautiful. And I really doubled down on both my faith and my spirituality over the last 2 years. And it's been a quantum leap in all areas. So to answer your question, it was a reread of The Secret that really initiated the spark. And then the fire started burning. And now I can't get enough of this stuff. It's, to be honest with you, it's my favorite topic.
I love it too. And wow, your fiance's intuition there is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
God I got
that's
the MRI.
yeah, seriously. Yeah, seriously. That's incredible. So before we let you go, what is alive for you right now? What is something that you are reading or learning about and something that is just like really exciting for you?
Something I'm really excited about is we have our first book coming out August 15th. We signed a record first time author book deal with Wiley Publishing. It's called The Reinvention Formula. And I'm really excited about it because even if you didn't like me, hard to fathom, I know. One thing that you couldn't deny is that I'm an expert in reinvention. Why? Because I had one life for 35 years and then I pivoted and had a ton of success in this totally different life. So I know a thing or two about reinventing yourself. And I think reinvention is sexy and applicable for everybody in some capacity, no matter how old you are. And again, people think CLS was an overnight success, but what they don't realize, I've been working on myself 15 years and I put all of this into one vessel, which is the book, and I'm just really excited about it. In regards to other stuff that I'm reading, I'm consuming content every single day because I love this stuff, and number two, because it's my career now and for the rest of my life. So it's on me to constantly be learning and then pour it back into my community and my clients and all that stuff. Right now, I really do. I love the woo woo stuff, but I like to combine it with the practical. Really big on that stuff. Just really into all the stuff that we're doing right now with the quantum, with the energy. Love it all. Nothing specific that I'm reading right now. I'm actually in between books. I always have this thing right here. I'll whip it out. Think and Grow Rich, which is the Bible, which I recently reread at another season, and it was great. Just excited about all this stuff, specifically the vibrational stuff, because I think if you buy into that, and I was skeptical for a while because I was always an NLP mindset guy, and this was beyond my senses. If you can let go of that and just buy in, you'll be astonished at how much happens for you in a relatively short amount of time, because then you can collapse time. Right. So I would highly suggest everyone, if you're not already, if they're listening to you, I imagine they are, but really do a deep dive into the spiritual work, whoever you're, whether it's Abraham Hicks, The Secret, um, my mind's drawing a blank right now. Anyone that talks about this stuff, it's great for you, and it really opens up all new capacities. But I'll end the plane with this. Kabbalah is something I'm really interested in right now.
That's awesome. Yeah, I would say one of my gateway books that I recommend to everyone is anything by Joe Dispenza or Becoming Supernatural. It's incredible because he marries science with the woo woo, so it's a lot easier for people to digest. So he'll use like clinical studies and actual research to whatever he's saying that sounds crazy, but I feel like magic a lot of the times is just something that science hasn't caught up to and isn't able to explain necessarily. So if you were to bring an iPhone back, hundreds of years ago, they'd be like, "What is this witchcraft?" And then they'd burn you for it. So it just remain curious and approach things like a child would, like excited curiosity instead of judgment.
That's great.
Hmm.
Remain curious. I think
Hmm.
that's a great trait to have, and I think that's something everybody should strive to possess and stay open and be
Hmm.
available.
Yeah. Well, Craig, this was amazing. I had so much fun chatting with you. And honestly, you have got to be tapped into something magical and special because your podcast is thriving. It's growing. Your guests are incredible. Your conversations are incredible. And I really love the work that you're doing. Before we head out, do you want to tell the guests where they can follow you, how they can support you? And we heard about the book, but any other projects that you might be working on?
Yeah, anywhere you buy books, it's available for pre-order right now. The Reinvention Formula. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, the CLS Experience, on all the social media platforms at Craig Siegel _CLS. Come stop by. I love to say hello. And if you like daily inspirational nuggets, you could join our free texting community. Just text 917-634-3796 and text the word Candice so I know that you heard the conversation here.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you for having me.
And that's it for this week's episode of Chatting with Candice. Before you go, make sure that you leave that 5-star review. I couldn't do this without you. It helps other people discover this podcast. And if you really enjoy this content or other episodes, feel free to share them with your friends, family, and on social. And as always, I'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.